Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that those who entered the Nauvoo Temple and saw the 12 wooden oxen for the first time thought they were real? Join us as we learn about the importance of proxy baptisms being performed and recorded with proper priesthood authority in the house of the Lord.
All right, today we're doing a deep dive into the very earliest construction of the Nauvoo Temple, and I want you to forget the finished building for a minute. You know, the spire, the beautiful stonework.
Yeah, we're going underground.
We are going straight into the basement. We're focusing on a temporary structure built down there, the baptismal font.
And this is such a foundational moment. I mean, what really sets the Nauvoo Temple apart from, say, the earlier Kirtland Temple is that Nauvoo was designed from the ground up to be the place for all the higher ordinances.
All of them.
Kirtland had some, but Nauvoo was the full commitment. And that commitment, it really starts right there in the basement with this font.
And that's our mission today. We're extracting the details of how this one specific ordinance, baptism for the dead, was commanded to be, well, formalized and moved indoors, all while under this intense historical pressure.
Exactly. You're watching a shift in real time from baptisms in the river to this consecrated, dedicated space. And the visual details are just incredible, especially for something they knew wouldn't last.
Which brings us to the visual that just immediately grabbed me in the research. This font, it didn't just sit on some blocks. It was built resting on the backs of 12 carved wooden oxen. And the accounts we have from visitors, they noted these oxen were so perfectly cut out of timber that people who saw them would look with surprise, resembling the living animal.
And that image, I think it just sets the stage perfectly. It tells you right away that even though this was a stopgap, they treated the work with this incredible reverence. You know, this artistry.
It's a story of faith rushing to meet a deadline.
It is. And a story where symbolic detail was somehow a priority, even when they were facing just immense logistical problems.
Okay, so let's set the timeline for this. Before this temple font, where were these ordinances happening?
Where they were performing baptisms, both for the living and for the dead, right there in the Mississippi River.
And when did this idea of proxy baptism for the dead actually become, public doctrine?
So the doctrine was first introduced publicly by Joseph Smith on August 15th, 1840. He was speaking at a funeral for a church member named Seymour Brunson. So we're talking a really short window of time from the initial announcement to the command to move it indoors.
It's amazing how fast that mandate came down. Just 5 months later, the whole practice of river baptisms is essentially revoked.
It was January 19th, 1841. That's when the revelation comes commanding the saints to build a temple with a font. And it makes it very clear that the river was only ever a temporary allowance.
What's the specific language there, the language that really pushes that transition?
It's very direct. The revelation says, "The ordinance belongeth to my house, and cannot be acceptable to me, only in the days of your poverty, wherein ye are not able to build a house unto me."
So it belongs in the house.
It belongs in the house. The river was only okay in their poverty when building a dedicated space wasn't an option.
That's a critical distinction, isn't it? It implies that as soon as they had the ability and the instruction to build, the old way just wasn't acceptable anymore. The standard was raised.
Precisely. It's a shift from a public, open practice to a sacred, reserved ordinance. And the instruction was clear. This was integral to the temple, even if nothing else was finished.
And the prophet drove that point home with a hard deadline. By October 3rd, 1841, the basement is almost done and the word comes down.
Yeah.
There shall be no more baptisms for the dead until the ordinance can be attended to in the Lord's house. That's it. The clock just stopped on river baptisms.
And that's the historical weight of this temporary font. It had to be the immediate fulfillment of that command. It forced them from this conceptual idea to dedicated practice in, less than a year.
So given that deadline, the work had to be fast. But what's so surprising is the level of artistry they poured into it, even knowing it was just a placeholder.
This is where you see faith just overriding pure practicality. They needed a font now, but a permanent stone font. That would take way too much time to quarry and cut and install.
So they go with wood.
They built a massive temporary one out of wood.
Let's talk about the physical thing itself. The builder was Elijah Fordham. It was made of Wisconsin pine, which, that's not exactly a material built to hold thousands of gallons of water forever.
No, not at all. And it was big. 16 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. It would have been an imposing sight in that basement.
And the design was steeped in ancient symbolism, which again, it just shows that the function was what mattered, not the temporary material.
Absolutely. The 12 oxen supporting it are crucial. They represent the 12 tribes of Israel, carrying the weight of this work for all generations.
And the craftsmanship on these oxen, it just sounds incredible. I keep coming back to those descriptions of how lifelike they were.
We have John C. Bennett's eyewitness account, and he really details this dedication to how it looked. He said the oxen were painted as white as snow. And get this, the panels underneath the font had various scenes handsomely painted.
Painted scenes in a muddy basement on a temporary structure.
Think about that. In a community under huge financial strain, they're hiring artists to paint scenes on panels that almost no one will see, on something they know they're going to tear out.
So why? What does that tell you about their priorities?
It has to speak to the sacred nature of the ordinance. If the work being done in the font was eternal, then the vessel itself had to reflect that purpose, no matter how long it was going to last. It was a commitment to holiness.
But the sources also give us a bit of a reality check. I mean, it was built fast, out of pine, it wasn't perfect.
No, not by a long shot. The records are pretty clear that it started to leak. That's a major issue for a giant wooden tank in a basement.
And that wasn't the only problem, was it? There was a huge logistical issue.
Right. The ceiling was too low. The original construction didn't leave enough headroom for the people working in and around the font.
So what did they do?
Their solution wasn't to, adjust the font. The sources say they had to tear up the basement floor and actually lower it by several feet.
After they'd already started building, wow, that's a huge task. To have to dig down further just adds so much delay to an already urgent timeline.
It really just underscores the intensity of it all. I mean, they were figuring things out as they went, racing against persecution and its divine command. It's why the dedication of just this one part of the temple was such a milestone.
And that race finally culminates in the dedication of the font on November 8, 1841. This must have been a huge moment of relief.
Oh, absolutely. The leaders who were there, Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, John Taylor, they knew how significant this was, and they didn't waste any time. They put it to use immediately.
The sources are so specific here. What did they do right after the dedication prayer?
They performed 40 baptisms for the dead. Right then and there, it was a rapid, immediate start to the work in that consecrated space.
And it wasn't just the baptisms.
No, the work required official confirmation, and that was performed by Willard Richards, Wilford Woodruff, and George A. Smith.
Which speaks to the need for order, for authority.
Yeah.
Every single step was formalized from the very first hour.
Exactly. And while that first day was November 8th, the work just gained momentum. The sources pinpoint the specific date the general membership could start performing ordinances there, Sunday, November 21st, 1841.
So just over 2 weeks after dedication, the work is fully underway for all the saints.
Yes. And the fact that they dedicated the basement specifically for this, before the main temple walls were even fully up, it just shows you the priority. Establishing that sacred space and the authority for that ordinance, that was the first order of business.
And that need for authoritative performance immediately leads to another need, right?
The need for accurate recording. Suddenly, the spiritual validity of what they were doing was directly tied to the administrative detail of writing it all down correctly.
And this is where our deep dive shifts from, construction history to core doctrine. The prophet Joseph Smith writes 2 really important letters in 1842 that are all about this. It's not enough to do the work.
It has to be documented perfectly. Yeah. He commanded that a recorder had to be there for every single ordinance. And when you think about the number of baptisms they were performing, that's a huge undertaking.
And he wasn't just talking about a checklist for that font. The first letter, it emphasizes this idea of perpetuity. What does the command say about these records?
It says, "Let all the records be had in order, that they may be put in the archives of my holy temple, to be held in remembrance from generation to generation."
From generation to generation. So these weren't just logs for the day. They were creating an archive for all of human history.
That's it. It connects the act performed in that wooden font to the entire span of time, past and future. The meticulous paperwork turns a temporary act into a permanent archival truth.
And that administrative rigor is all justified by the theology in the second letter. This is the why. Why the temple, why the font, why it was also critical.
This is the heart of it. The Revelation clarifies this interdependence between generations for their salvation.
Let's break that down, because this is the core concept explaining the urgency behind all this work.
The Revelation says, "They," meaning the dead, "without us cannot be made perfect." Neither can we, without our dead, be made perfect. That's the key. It means salvation is a linked generational effort.
The living and the dead need each other.
They require each other to complete the eternal pattern.
Wow. That just elevates the simple act of filling a font with water and writing down names into this essential spiritual mission. It's interdependent.
Exactly. And that makes the performance and the accurate record of it vital for everyone. The sources really stress that it wasn't just about the ritual, but about authoritative performance, followed by accurate documentation, all because the work is collaborative. The paperwork proves the authority and makes that connection between generations viable forever.
And to really appreciate that, we have to remember the context. All this intense labor building, digging the floor down, the recording, it was all done through, as the sources say, great sacrifice and hardship.
Right. This was not a peaceful construction project.
Yeah.
This temple, including that temporary font, was built under siege. The main structure wasn't even fully finished before the saints were forced to leave Nauvoo.
There's a really powerful quote from Brigham Young that just paints this visceral picture of the environment they were in. It makes the hardship real.
It really does. His account shows they were simultaneously builders and soldiers. He wrote that they did it by the aid of sword in one hand and trowel and hammer in the other, with firearms at hand.
Sword in one hand, trowel in the other.
The saints, through hunger and thirst and weariness and watchings and prayings, so far completed the temple despite the devices of the mob.
That dual identity of defender and builder, it just highlights the extreme duress. I mean, they were literally risking their lives to perform and record these ordinances.
And it connects right back to the urgency of that font. They needed it done fast because they knew their time in Nauvoo was limited. They had to prioritize the sacred ordinances, the baptisms, the endowments, before they were forced out.
So they completed the essential parts of the temple, got the necessary ordinances done, and then, in Brigham Young's words, they removed westward to save their lives.
The whole story of that temporary font is a testament to prioritizing an eternal mandate over their own immediate physical safety. An extraordinary investment of sacrifice and craftsmanship into something that was only ever meant to be a bridge.
So as we wrap up, this has been a really compelling look into what was essentially a quick fix structure, but one that shaped the entire doctrinal future of the faith.
Absolutely.
We looked at the surprising artistry of that temporary pine font, the visual power of those perfectly cut oxen, and this strict mandate for authority and record keeping that grew right out of that basement.
And the sources really reveal that the stakes involved in moving from the river to the temple weren't just logistical, they were profoundly spiritual.
You know, what stands out to me is that duality. The immense practical hardship, the leaks, lowering the floor, the constant danger, right alongside this insistence on visual perfection, painting scenes on the side panels.
Right.
It just shows that for them, the sacred commitment was non-negotiable no matter the circumstances.
And for me, what's most profound is the theological core that made it all necessary. The sources stress that this temple, built under the shadow of a mob, was essential because the living and the dead are fundamentally dependent on each other for perfection. That's the engine driving this entire incredible effort.
So, a final thought for you to consider. Given that level of sacrifice, enduring hunger, weariness, literally building with a sword in one hand, what does that fierce interdependence suggest about the value they placed on connection and lineage? They were willing to risk everything to bridge that gap between generations.
It's a powerful thought. What are you willing to sacrifice to ensure those essential connections are maintained?
A truly thought-provoking conclusion.
Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org